Okay, I am back. This is my latest political talk video. It's been a couple months since my last one. I had said back following the first Democratic debate, I would wait a while before I talked about the Democrats running for president again, and I feel enough time has passed, so I'm going to give my updated thoughts on the Democrats running for president in 2020, but I'm also going to talk about something else I'll bring up at the end of this video. So, yeah. As of the time I'm recording this, we've had 3 Democratic debates. So I've decided after watching the 3 debates, I'm going to talk about the 11 Democrats who are basically, I feel are still worth talking about. So these are the ones who I feel actually have a shot at getting the nomination next year. So I'm not going to talk about anybody who either already dropped out or basically is polling at 0 or even 1% in most national polls. Like, there's no point in talking about them if they have no shot. I just want to share my thoughts on just 11 Democrats. The big 3, or top 3 as I called them in my first video, as well as some others that I feel that need to be talked about. So yeah, given the introduction short on this one, I'm just going to get into it. This is, like I said, my updated thoughts on the Democrats running for president in 2020. Okay, so for this first part, I'm going to talk about the top 3, which is Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders. So first, I'm going to talk about Elizabeth Warren. I still really like Elizabeth Warren. Now, when I did a previous video where I gave my initial thoughts before and after the first debates, I think I said in both videos Elizabeth Warren's my number 1 pick. And every now and then, she's still my number 1, but then she kind of goes back down to being my number 2 with Bernie Sanders, who I'll get back to in a few minutes. But currently, she's my number 2 pick at the time that I'm making this video, and Bernie Sanders is my number 1. But again, I'll get back to that more when I talk about Sanders. On the one hand, I still support her progressive policies, her attacks on large banks and corporations. Recently, there's been some heat going on between her and Mark Zuckerberg and her wanting to break up Facebook. I don't even have a Facebook, but I think that is a pretty good idea. So there are a lot of progressive policies I do support. On the other hand, though, like I said, I'm starting to support Sanders more because I've seen more of his policies I also really like. And some of Warren's policies, I just feel like he has stronger policies by comparison if they both have like a similar, say, Medicare for all or free college for all policies. I think his are slightly stronger. Plus, and I brought this up last time as well, I do worry that her conservative past might impact some recent decisions he's been facing. Now, I will say this. Of the top 3, looking at all 3 debates, she was the strongest debater, not only of them, but I think of pretty much everybody. Sure, some people did better on one night compared to her, but overall, I think all 3 nights she was the strongest debater. And overall, and I brought this up last time, I do like Warren because she has a similar story, like I brought up in one of my previous videos, how for a long time I consider myself more of a Republican, and it's only in recent years I consider myself more of a progressive Democrat. So I kind of relate to Warren on that aspect, but at the moment she's my number 2 pick. Next, I want to talk about Joe Biden. I did mention in one of my earlier videos that my main issue with Biden is that he's a very moderate conservative Democrat, and I think a combination of his age, as well as the mindset he's had basically being in politics for so long, is going to be all a disadvantage for him. And recently, including the last 3 debates, he's had a lot of gaffes, made stupid comments, and made mistakes. And I don't want to be careful on how I word this, especially because I'm going to be talking about Sanders in a minute. I think Biden and Sanders, both being old, is not an automatic weakness for them. But with Biden, it seems to be more of an issue than it is with Sanders. Because I'm personally worried that it seems that not all of Biden's mental capabilities are there. So, like, he's had his fair share of bad moments, but he's also, during the debates, but also even on the campaign trail, he said some things or even gotten things wrong. Like, he once said, oh, this, like, specific shooting happened when I was vice president. No, it happened after he left office as vice president, so. And then he's also talked about how he took pride in working with segregationists and racist Republicans in the past. So, like I said, he's still very conservative, and he's basically from a different time of the Democratic Party that the Democratic base doesn't want anymore. So, I have a prediction. Biden will be lucky if he's still in the race after the New Hampshire primary. If he doesn't do well in both Iowa and New Hampshire, which I don't think he will, he'll drop after New Hampshire, because he dropped early in 88. He dropped, no, or was it? Yeah, not 88. It was 88. He dropped early in 08. I think he's going to drop early again in 20. Like, he's going to be there for probably the first few states, but once he realizes he has no chance, if 3 or 4 candidates do better than him in these first couple primaries, he'll drop. And finally, Bernie Sanders. Like I said, currently Sanders is my number 1 pick. And while I did say in my previous videos that I wasn't initially on the Bernie bandwagon, I also wanted to be open-minded for other candidates this time before I decided if I truly wanted to support Sanders right off the gate this time. And like I said, he keeps going back and forth between my favorite with him and Warren. But at the moment, he is my number 1 pick. And having seen more progressive policies come from the guy than back before the first debate, I'm more supportive of him this time than I was initially in 2016. Additionally, also looking more at his record, as well as the things he said both now and 2016, I think he's probably the most consistently progressive Democrat running. For Warren, as well as a few others I'm going to talk about in the next part of this video, I feel they talk a decent game with progressive policies, but then they're trying to find ways to weasel out of it or talk it back a bit, try to compromise. Whereas he's consistently saying, no, we have to go full-on progressive, and he's a true fighter. Additionally, going back to what I was saying with Biden, Bernie is also fairly old. They're both in their 70s. But whereas with Biden, I'm worried about his mental capacities, Bernie, I'm slightly more worried about physical capabilities. I meant to say capabilities with Biden as well. But recently, Bernie was in the hospital, and he had some sort of surgery for his heart. And he's expected to make a full recovery, but that's still something that should be at least considered. If Bernie is older than Trump, and sure, he's okay now, but can he continue being on the campaign trail for another year and be president for 4 years? That's my biggest worry. Like I said, the surgery is one thing, and also in the third debate, he sounded kind of sick. So I think that's part of what hurt him in the polls after that debate, because he wasn't talking as much, and he kind of struggled to talk at some points. But at the moment, he's my number 1 pick, though we'll see what happens, because we're still a little while out from Iowa and New Hampshire. So like I said, those are my top 3, and now I'm going to talk about 8 more candidates who, well, I don't know how many of them have a decent shot. At the moment, I think all of them, there's still a chance for them to be president, or at least get the nomination, but I still, or at the very least, even if they don't, I still want to give my thoughts following the 3 debates and how I feel they are doing. So yeah, let's get into those 8 candidates. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about another 8 Democrats running right now who either I think still have a decent chance of getting the nomination, or even if they don't, I still want to talk about them, because for a lot of these Democrats, my opinions have changed on them since the first Democratic debate and when I did my video then. So I'm going to talk about Cory Booker, Tulsi Gabbard, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, Julian Castro, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, and Andrew Yang. And like I said at the beginning, anyone who's basically already dropped out or has 0 or 1% polling right now, so they have absolutely no shot of getting the nomination, I'm not even going to talk about them. So I'm just going to go in order, about a minute or so for each one. So first, Cory Booker. Like I said in the first video, Cory Booker is a likable person, and he is, all in all, a decent Democrat. And hey, props to him once again for dating Rosario Dawson. I said that in the last video, I am a big fan of Rosario Dawson, but my main issue I said in the first video is that, to me, he's not exactly the most trustworthy of Democrats, because he sometimes talks progressive game, but he also sometimes talks conservative game. He's talked about things like Medicare for all and bringing in, like, making new trade deals for drugs so they'd be cheaper, especially for importing them from Canada. But then when push comes to shove, he often votes against some of the things he said he cares about. And looking at these first 3 debates, Cory Booker wasn't really the strongest debater. He didn't really have too many standout moments, or at least good moments. I mean, the first debate he spoke Spanish randomly. But even then, I feel like of all the 11 Democrats that I'm going to talk about, I feel like in the 3 debates, he overall was the least significant. Like, if you edited all of the Cory Booker out of all the debates, I feel like nothing really changed that much because Booker didn't really say too much that really won me over one way or the other. Like, I don't hate Booker any more than when he's the first debate, but I don't like him anymore compared to the first debate. So he'll probably drop out after another, maybe a couple of debates, maybe a couple of primaries. And he'll probably just remain in the Senate for a while. He might run again in the future, but I think he's going to, once he drops, he'll just try and remain in the Senate for another term or two. But I think he will run again in the future. I just think at the very least, like I said, he's just there for the most part. Not bad, but not good. All right, Tulsi Gabbard. I really like Tulsi, and I think she is one of the stronger debaters. She's had her moments from all the debates. And I still support her on military policies, like we need to stop regime change wars, we need to make cuts to the military and invest domestically and take care of our veterans once they come home. Like, she's talked about all that. I support all that. But my main issue with Tulsi Gabbard is I'm worried she's stepping back on certain progressive policies, particularly Medicare for All. It seems like in recent interviews I've seen her and she's not really fighting for Medicare at all as much as she used to. And additionally, she didn't make it to the third debate, unfortunately. So it seems like something I said in the last video, how Bernie Sanders was kind of screwed over by the DNC and the mainstream media in 2016. Seems like they're doing that now with Gabbard in 2020. So I'm still hopeful for Gabbard, but I'm kind of losing some of the support. I still think she'd be a great VP pick for someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, but at the moment, I think it's going to be a struggle for her to get the nomination, but if she did, I'd still support her. Okay, Amy Klobuchar. Or Cloud Bootchar, if you're a fan of Kyle Kalinske. I'm going to keep this one real short. I'm still not a big fan of Amy Klobuchar. I wasn't a big fan at the time, but I said I'd be open-minded, give her a few debates, and whereas Booker was kind of boring, what little I remember of Amy Klobuchar, I just don't like. She's too moderate. She seems to have anger issues and violence. There was a story that came out, I think, earlier this past week or so, of her once killing a duck while playing golf. There have been other stories that come out in the last couple months of how she's not only abused, but not treated her staff in a good manner, and she doesn't have the best temperament, for lack of a better term. In fact, the only reason why I'm talking about her is just so I can say this. Amy, of all the Lemon Democrats that are basically still running that actually have a shot, please drop. No joke. If you got the nomination, you'd be the only Democrat I would not vote for. I wouldn't vote for Trump. I want to make that clear right here and now. But I wouldn't vote for Amy Klobuchar if she was the nominee. Any of the other Democrats on this list, I would still vote for. Amy Klobuchar is the only one I would not vote for. So, not only think she has almost no chance, I would not vote for her if she was the Democratic nominee. I'm just going to make that right here and now. I have to say that right here now, I mean. Okay, next, Beto O'Rourke. And this one is not really painful, but a little sad for me to say. I brought up in the last video with the first primary debates how I really wanted to support Beto as well as Castro, who I'll get to in a minute, because they're Texas Democrats. And Beto, when he was running against Ted Cruz, kind of portrayed himself as a real progressive, but recently his campaigns kind of had a up and down roller coaster of a ride of being popular, not being popular, being progressive, not being progressive. Like having really strong policies and then almost not talking about policies at all. Like I said, I keep going back and forth and liking on the guy. Probably the strongest thing he said was actually in the most recent debate where he has a plan to get rid of AR-15s. Now I'll just say this. I do support the Second Amendment right to own guns, but personally, it is debatable whether or not, at least in my opinion, AR-15s and other military-grade weapons should be owned by American civilians. And he did make a good point where he basically said if you are a civilian and your desire to get an AR-15, you can get a regular gun for hunting and for protection. The only reason why you would need an AR-15 is if it was to intentionally kill someone, because that's what an AR-15 is designed to do. So that was probably one of the strongest moments he had in any of the three debates. But my main issue with Beto O'Rourke, like I said, is because he's had a bit of a zigzag back and forth campaign, I feel he's fallen very far behind at this point. It'll be very hard for him to get the nomination at this point. But I'm also worried in the long term, because that's just the short term. In the long term, I'm worried his run for president has actually hurt his future plans for holding public office in the elected office in the United States. Like, at first I thought he's going to run a little while, drop, and then run against our other senator here, John Cornyn. But, use that wave of popularity to help him run again. But I feel like, no, he's actually lost that wave. And I feel like if he doesn't get the nomination, he doesn't have a good shot of actually winning any seat in Texas again. So it will be interesting to see what the future holds for Beto O'Rourke, because, like I said, I think him running actually hurt his political chances in the future. Next, Julian Castro. Julian, to me, is basically this I guess, season's dark horse underdog, similar to how Bernie was last time. He's had good moments at each primary debate. Now, I gotta be honest, I don't think he's gonna get the nomination at this point. He's fallen from basically the middle of the stage to near the edge of the stage. And I still feel he'd probably be better as a VP pick for someone like Warren or Sanders to balance out the ticket. I think that'd probably be the best presidential ticket, one of them with Castro as the VP, especially if the Democrats want to get the South and particularly Latino voters. Getting Castro would probably be a really good idea. Because, as I also said in the last video, I always thought Castro being an Obama-era secretary would be more moderate, but he has shown himself he is somewhat progressive on a few issues, particularly for immigration policies. And in fact, I could even make the argument he's even more progressive than Beto O'Rourke is. So, while I'd say he's probably the Democrat, at least in this category of these 8, I support the most, I honestly don't think he's going to get the nomination. But like I said, if he was a VP pick, I think he'd be the best VP pick for someone like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. Next, Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg is a smart and likable guy, but I've lost most of my support for him. Similar with Beto O'Rourke, he's fallen recently and has pulled back on progressive policies, but unlike Beto O'Rourke, where I feel like he's at least kind of somewhat trying to be progressive, somewhat not trying to be progressive, I feel like Pete Buttigieg is basically trying to abandon all the progressive images and policy ideas that he started with when he began his campaign. Additionally, there are still some issues regarding the police back in his hometown in Indiana, as well as another recent story that came out, I think, last month. So, there are some issues I think Buttigieg has to deal with in Indiana, and I think it would have been best if he had run for, say, the Senate or governor of Indiana before trying to run for president. Because I think he basically took a huge leap, and it backfired just as it basically backfired with Beto. It's weird how, and I didn't even realize until just now, how many similarities there are between Beto and Pete at this point. So yeah, I don't think he has the best shot either, but I'd still vote for him. Whereas, like I said, and even Beto, I just wouldn't vote for Amy. Like I said, she's the only one I wouldn't vote for if she was the nominee, but anybody else I would still vote for. Okay, number 7 is Kamala Harris. I did say in my first 2 videos that she was in my top 3, behind Warren and Sanders. She's no longer my top 3. I don't even think she's in my top 5 anymore. Similar with Buttigieg and O'Rourke, she's pulled back a lot on progressive issues. And I've also learned more about her time as a California prosecutor and as well as some of her other office positions before she became a senator. And I'm not as supportive of her as I used to. She still has a few policies every now and then I kind of agree with her on. And she did have a couple of good moments here and there throughout the debates. But she also had a few bad moments as well. But she wasn't the worst debater, to be honest. There were enough good moments, I think, kind of overshadowed the bad moments with her. But the debates can only take you so far. I mean, if you only watch the debates, yeah, she's done okay. But when you watch other interviews she's done in between the debates, yeah, I'm basically kind of losing my support for her. And I think long-term, she probably, like Booker, might drop out, try and stay in the Senate for another term or 2, and then run again. I could see her doing that. And then finally, Andrew Yang. I was kind of mixed on Andrew Yang back in the first video I did, just because I didn't know too much about the guy. Well, now I like him a lot more after seeing him in the debates. He did okay, though admittedly, similar with Tulsi, I feel like the mainstream media and even the Democratic National Convention or committees trying to screw Andrew Yang because I think in all 3 debates, or maybe it was 2 of the 3, I don't remember, he had the least amount of time on the nights he was on, where he spoke less than everybody. And when he did speak, he was actually pretty good. And like I said, I wish he had gotten more positive time in the press and even on debates. But when he's in individual interviews, he does a really good job. I've seen a lot more interviews of Andrew Yang, and he's really good. But here's my main issue with Andrew Yang. And I even said this, I think, in a David Pakman video in the comment section. My main issue with Andrew Yang is, while I think he's really good on domestic policies, not just the universal basic income he's talked about, he's had a few other issues I've heard him talk about and read online about him that he supports. So on domestic policies, he's really good. But my main worry is that I don't think he's that strong on military or foreign policies. And when you're electing someone to be president of the United States, you want someone who's going to be strong in both domestic and foreign policies. And when I've heard him talk about foreign policies or his plans regarding the military, I don't think Yang is the strongest candidate. Now, he's better when it comes to some issues on the military than a few other Democrats, who basically, when it comes to military, are almost the same as Republicans. But I just feel overall Yang is not the strongest in every field. I would still vote for him. It's just, I feel like there are Democrats who are stronger overall than Yang is. But I've come to respect and support Yang more than I did back at the time of the first Democratic debates. So yeah, that's my opinions on those 8. And I said at the beginning, I wanted to talk about one last thing before I end this video. And it's something I'm just going to call my early prediction. And I'll get to that and explain what I mean. Okay, so I've given my thoughts on these 11 Democrats. And like I said, with the exception of Klobuchar, I'd vote for any of them if they got the nomination. Anyone who I didn't talk about in this video either dropped or I think has no shot at getting the nomination at this point. But I had this, I guess, idea of something I wanted to end this video on before I do another political talk video. And I know it's still pretty early on, but this is something I want to talk about, and that is my early prediction map. So I found a map of the United States and the Electoral College, and I said this, I think, in the previous video. My next political talk video, I'm going to talk about the Electoral College, which will probably come out at the end of October, early November, probably. It's like another month or two. So I looked basically back at the 2016 election, current polls upcoming for the 2020 election, and this is my early prediction map. I'm going to try and hold it up to the camera a little close for a minute, and I'm just going to talk. So basically what I did was, this is my initial predictions. If any generic Democrat, because we don't know who's going to get the nomination yet, we're still a little over a year out, we're going to go up against any generic Republican, because at this time, basically impeachment inquiries have begun for Trump, and he does have a few primary opponents, there is a chance that he may not actually be the nominee next year. So this map is basically my first initial prediction. If any generic Democrat and any generic Republican were going to run up against each other in 2020, this is how I think so far where I am confident where it's going to go. So, I'm going to pull back a little. If it would just picked a random Democrat and a random Republican to run for president in 2020, this is what I think so far. All the blue states here, there are 13, and all the red states here, 19, are the ones I am most confident are going to go to that generic Democrat and to that generic Republican. Meanwhile, the remaining 18 states are in purple. These are the states that I think are either swing states or toss-up states, which means, yes, in 2016, they overwhelmingly went for a candidate, but I think there is a chance they could be up for grabs or even a swing state in 2020, particularly my home state of Texas, which I have as purple, especially following, like I said earlier and in a couple other videos, how close the election was between Beto and Ted Cruz, and how many Republicans have decided not to run for re-election. At least 6 at the time of this video's release in Texas are not going to run for re-election, so that means a few districts could be up for grabs. Well, then so could the state as a whole. So yeah, if you picked a random generic Democrat and a generic random Republican, currently I think the generic Republican would win 19 states and have 121 electoral votes. Any generic Democrat would win 13 states, so fewer than the Republican, but they'd win more electoral votes, 182, and they'd also win D.C. So, like I said, these states that are too soon to tell for sure without knowing specifically who the nominees are, we have 18 states and 239 electoral votes up for grabs. So like I said, this is just my early prediction map. Maybe next time I do one of these videos, I'll have another map, but this is just at the moment where I feel things are. So yeah, unless something really crazy happens, not counting the purple states, I'm pretty confident about the red and blue states as they are. So this is just, like I said, my early prediction map. So at the moment, the Republican wins more states, but the Democrat wins more electoral votes. But neither of them has a majority yet, so only time will tell how this map will change once we actually know who the nominees are. Alright, and that will bring this video to an end. Not really got too much to say on the conclusion for this one. This is just something I've been meaning to talk about for a little while. I've been working on the script for this one for a few weeks. And yeah, like I said, I feel that with time, me being open-minded about all these Democrats, my opinions for most of them have changed. But with the exception of one, any of these 11 Democrats, if they became the nominee, which I think a lot of them still have a shot, I would be happy to vote for them. But we won't really know for sure until after the first couple of primaries. Like I said, Iowa, New Hampshire, as well as South Carolina and Nevada. Once we have those first 4 states, I bet most of these people will probably drop. So we'll only have like a handful left, and then we'll have a good idea who the nominee is going to be. And but regardless, and plus, at the moment, there is still a chance that Trump may not even run for president in 2020. I mean, with the impeachment inquiry going on, who knows what will happen. But even if it's not Trump, and like I showed with the prediction map, at the moment, neither side I can really say one way or the other. I feel confident until we know exactly who the nominees are going to go, or who the nominees are going to be. But at the moment, it is still just mostly speculation and just my personal opinions and predictions, but this is just how I feel. So if you liked what I had to say, thank you very much for watching. Feel free to comment if you want. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't. And hopefully I'll get back to you in the future. And like I said, I have a few other videos like this planned in the near future, so please check those out. All right, have a good day, everybody. Take care.